What are the top sources of protein we as diabetics should be eating as part of our daily diet? Could plant-based foods be a better alternative to animal proteins? Can they provide all the essential amino acids needed to keep our bodies free from long-term health complications? Today, we will look at the single most expensive study ever done in human history. It provides not only a glimpse into our future, but reveals how the macronutrients we eat determine disease and life expectancy. Welcome to the Resilient Diabetic. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that gray notification bell. That way, you will be alerted when new life-changing episodes have been published. And if you've learned something new today, please hit that like button for me. Whether we are a type 1 insulin-dependent diabetic like myself, who happen to have an autoimmune attack later on in life, or one becomes an insulin-resistant type 2 diabetic, we know our health specifically revolves solely on diets. The philosopher Hippocrates gave us one critical overriding law we must abide by, and I will quote him: "Let thy food be your medicine." Good food is medicine. Bad food will need you to take more and more medicine. In order to make food that healing medicine, we must first and foremost choose good, high-quality proteins. That will do four things for us. 1, keep us satisfied all day so we're not hungry or thinking about that next meal. 2nd, it'll allow us extreme blood sugar control with little to no pressures put on that pancreas if we are type 2 diabetics, or if insulin-dependent diabetics, minimize the doses that are needed on a daily basis. 3rd, the right proteins cooked in the right fats do not add to insulin resistance and inflammation, keeping us insulin sensitive. 4th, it aids in body composition changes. Protein intake is critical to the maintenance and growth of muscle tissue. And it is this muscle we must keep as diabetics. Not only is it vital for our long-term survival, but this storage tank, if you will, is responsible for soaking up or absorbing all of those sugars or carbs in the bloodstream after a meal. The more muscle you have, the easier it will be to control your blood sugars. However, there is an elephant in the room. Our healthcare professionals will say one set of proteins are healthy for us, and then there are those like myself whose job it is to arm you with the knowledge so that you can think and objectively see for yourself a different set of proteins as superior. In the quest to heal oneself, we must remove all emotions from the equation because they then become the enemy of facts. You see this first, an overriding discrepancy through our glucose meters, which tell a very different story on certain beloved foods these professionals recommend for us diabetics. Let me give you our first incredible example, one you will never forget. The most expensive nutritional study ever done, a $625 million study, was pretty much just completed. And it will literally destroy your faith in the nutritional sciences because it not only failed to prove their misguided view that is, the low-fat, high-carb diet is best for health, but these blinded health institutions who funded the study are now doubling down on their poor, failed advice. What is it called? The Women's Health Initiative Dietary Intervention Study. A total of 49,000 women were randomized into two groups. One was a comparison group who ate their normal everyday diets. Or they were put into an intervention group that underwent behavioral and nutritional modifications to ensure their dietary fat intake was decreased while increasing vegetables, fruits, and unfortunately, highly processed grains and cereals too. It lasted for an average of 8.1 years. The data and analysis now coming in shows the low-fat dietary intervention group failed to not only protect against invasive breast cancer, but produce no real weight loss over the first 8 years. Objectively, strict adherence to the low-fat diet was associated with increased risk of weight gain. I might add, this was not evident unless you had access to their truthfully adjusted models. And here comes the really interesting part. The strongest predictor of future coronary heart disease in those post-menopausal women are all the classical clinical markers of insulin resistance, especially type 2 diabetes, a 10.7-fold increased risk. In other words, as they dropped the fats for more carbs, they became type 2 diabetics with metabolic syndrome. All of these markers of insulin resistance had a greater predictive value for coronary heart disease than did smoking. Cholesterol levels, which have always been the focus, was not a predictor at all. It is the blood sugars and hyperinsulinemia, or high circulating insulin levels, that is the true driver of disease and early death. There is a disgraceful attempt of trying to cover up the data, especially if one is trying to research this online. So I beg and implore you to watch the video done by Professor Tim Noakes. He explains the deceit, the fraud, and manipulation done to the data far better than I ever can. Once you see this, you will finally understand that you are on your own to critically think when it comes to taking nutritional advice. I will put that link in the description box below, or if you want to watch that video, it'll be right there for you. This leads us to the question of the day. What is the best sources of protein for us diabetics? Now, according to Google and the American Diabetes Association and those in the nutritional sciences who do control the information, they would list the top options as plant-based proteins such as beans, lentils, seeds, soy, or tofu. Nuts like almond butter, cashew butter, or peanut butter are also on that list. They are recommending the very things that turn these healthy postmenopausal women into future diabetics. If you are subscribed to this channel, then you already know some of the reasons why. These proteins are first, they're incomplete, meaning they do not have all the right amino acids or the building blocks we as humans need. Again, we are humans, not plants. Second, these protein sources are not only extremely high in carbohydrates, but some contain all the wrong types of fats. Polyunsaturated fats, high in the pro-inflammatory omega-6s. Vegetable oils, for example, were deviously marketed as to be heart healthy because it lowers cholesterol. But as you now know, cholesterol has no bearing on health. These deadly fats cause inflammation, raising insulin resistance, thus eventually blood sugars. And what is most important, and nobody seems to be stressing this, the excessive sugars in some of these proteins puts undue stress on the pancreas. If you are already diagnosed as a type 2 diabetic, then your pancreas is compromised, and it will continue to fail if pushed harder and harder to make more insulin. What makes diabetes so tricky and unique for each and every one of us is how healthy that pancreas is, and two, how much insulin-resistant fats are still embedded throughout the body. The more carbs you consume, the higher the stress that will be put on the pancreas, the faster it will die. And that includes consuming protein foods that also contain high amounts of carbohydrates. If we assume the gold standard, a superior source of protein, is animal proteins, and it is, then we have to understand all animal products have different advantages and disadvantages, and it is useful to understand how they compare to one another so you can make the best choices about which meats to eat as your go-to foods. We can explore different types of meats, some of which are a staple in my house: red meat or beef, poultry or chicken, turkey, seafood, and pork, but to a very, very small degree. These types of meats differ significantly in their nutrient quality and especially in the fats they contain. It is important to know what kinds of fats are in your meats. The first reason why, and this will be new to many of you, I am a believer in lean animal protein sources, especially for us diabetics. The fatter the cuts of beef, the harder it will be to control your blood sugars, especially if small amounts of carbs are eaten at the same time, like vegetables. In order to keep that A1C to 5 and under, we must have our blood sugars back into those non-diabetic ranges, that is, under 100 milligrams a deciliter, within 2 to 3 hours after every single meal. One of the other best sources of protein is eggs. But in the episode, Are Eggs Healthy for Diabetics to Eat Every Day?, which I will also link in the description box below, I explained when you feed a chicken a diet high in corn and grains, a vegetarian feed as they now proudly call it, food it does not eat in the wild like bugs and worms, you end up producing a sick, anemic bird that requires medications to keep it healthy. And the end result? The production of an inferior, colorless, nutrient-void yolk. This vegetarian feed is nothing more than a marketing ploy at our expense. So, let me indulge you on another study done on swine or pigs for their meat content. And these studies made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Unbeknownst to me, pork is actually the most consumed meat in the world, as I thought it was chicken. The growth and development of not only muscle tissue, but the thousands and thousands of other chemical reactions that occur within our bodies require a constant supply of protein, or its components, the amino acids to be exact. There are around 20 amino acids in nature that serves as our building blocks for protein biosynthesis. Pigs, just like us humans, cannot synthesize all 20 amino acids. Consequently, these essential dietary amino acids must be supplied exogenously or through our diet. Among all the essential amino acids, lysine is the first limiting one in swine nutrition management because it is the most deficient in nearly all typical swine diets. And guess what? Doesn't that sound familiar to what producers feed chickens? Cheap cereals and grains. So the million-dollar question, what happens to the meat of pigs that are fed these cheap, high-carb vegetarian diets low in lysine? Come to find out, their muscles develop high amounts of intramuscular fats. By feeding a pig diets high in grains and low in the right mixes of proteins, produces the same destructive process that occurs in our human bodies. They can actually produce fattier, more marble meat just by limiting this essential amino acid lysine. In other words, they are purposely producing diabetic pigs. And what is the link to us humans? It is that same marbled meat that occurs within us when we eat the same diet, high in processed carbohydrates. Insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes is caused by the fats that become embedded inside our livers, in between all the body organs and inside the muscle tissue, just exactly like what you see in those pictures. And these fats don't just sit there idly. They produce very toxic inflammatory byproducts. And it is these deadly fats that cause your pancreas into overdrive. It subsequently has to produce more and more insulin to lower blood sugars because these embedded fats make insulin ineffective. What is the irony? Globally, we as humans now get most of our protein from cereals than all other animal sources combined. That has become our deadly feed too. Next, we need to discuss the other devastating consequence of a grain-fed hog. That marbled meat will contain a higher percentage of polyunsaturated fats. These fats contain the deadly pro-inflammatory omega-6 fats, creating more inflammation and insulin resistance when eaten by us. Remember the adage, you are what you eat. Most of these deadly omega-6s we eat mainly come from vegetable oils or industrial seed oils as they should be called. And now, and to a smaller degree, the fatty proteins from poorly fed animals. If you can't afford it, grass-fed meat is supreme because it is leaner than meat from grain-fed animals and it has more of the anti-inflammatory omega-3 fatty acids. Look for chicken that is raised without antibiotics and try to find and source meat from local farmers and learn more about how it was raised. I bet many of you would love a comparison of chicken to beef, but in order for us to make that comparison, a fair comparison, we can use broiled ground beef containing of around 85% lean meat to 15% fat. Beef is a little higher in fats and contain more calories, vitamins, and key minerals like iron. The iron in red meat is superior to all proteins because it is in the form of heme iron, which is easily absorbed by our human bodies. Chicken, however, is richer in protein and is high in niacin and vitamin B6, as well as other minerals like phosphorus and selenium, but it cannot compare with beef or seafood in nutritional quality. Cost is the one category where chicken wins over almost any kind of meat. It is undeniable. Poultry is simply cheaper than most alternatives. Because of the feed given to chickens, it does have a much higher concentration of these polyunsaturated fats. Beef, on the other hand, has more of the heart-healthy monounsaturated fats. Chicken and beef are equal in the amounts of cholesterol they contain, but as you know now, that means absolutely nothing. When it comes to fish, choose wild seafood over farm caught, as this may also help boost your omega-3 intake too. Am I saying insulin resistance type 2 diabetes is caused by a consistent lack of high quality intake of protein, too much grains and polyunsaturated fats, soy-based products and oils being the absolute worst because of its high omega-6 content? The answer is yes. Society has become brainwashed. Take, for example, these new meatless burgers. The first three ingredients in this blood sugar raising, artificial Frankenstein of a monstrosity is water, followed by soy protein concentrate, and then sunflower oil. Sunflower oil, or this industrial seed oil, has an omega-6 to omega-3 ratio of, get this, 32 to 1. Our total daily ratios to keep us healthy should be around 3 to 1, or ideally a 1 to 1 ratio. Let's simply reanalyze this. The participants in the Women's Health Initiative were force-fed a diet just like what we see in the commercialized meat, egg, and hog industry. And they were expecting a different outcome from these animals. And what was the institutional response to the failed results? They felt fat intake was still not low enough and the carb intake was not high enough. I'll say this bluntly, blinded by continued ignorance and ego. Always remember, the right foods are medicine. So I bet many of you have additional questions like, how much protein does a diabetic need per day? What are the best kinds of proteins? I'll set up a playlist for you with the answers to all these great questions. And I'll even expose more deceit and misunderstandings doctors and nutritionalists are taught to this very day about this vital macronutrient. The first link you will see will be to subscribe to this all-important life-changing channel. The second is the link to the playlist on protein. Have a great and productive day, and we will see you soon with another new episode, which are always released bi-monthly. Bye for now.